was like, did my business close and nobody told me? Like, I just started saying yes.
Isn't there something very empowering about a person who goes in and owns all that stuff? Says, look, I'm 55, I'm 65, I'm 75, like, you.
You're not going to overcome any particular bias that somebody has across that table. And at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, if they really don't want to hire you because you're 50 or 55, whatever, do you want to work for that person? There is really no other place to go but up.
Money aside, nothing is better in the world than to get that kind of feedback from people who you really are helping. Hi, everybody. I am Dan and Dante. Welcome to Middle Age Mess, where we talk about people who aren't exactly senior citizens, but are having a lot of senior moments. On this show, we love to talk about journeys. We love to talk about people who started someplace, got old, looked around, realized they were losing their hair, and decided to go somewhere else. And today we've got a very interesting story from, the corporate rat race, which a lot of you are familiar with, into a more entrepreneurial venture where they're living their best life. Today we're talking with Melanie Mitchell Wexler. Melanie, what's going on?
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
So let's start talking about your journey into the middle-aged mess that we so love and enjoy.
Yeah. So I feel like I kind of came late to the game in terms of my career, to be honest with you. Like, I'm 50 now. So
You're a baby. You're a baby, Melanie. How dare you?
I remember in my career, I was a recruiter for over 20 plus years. And I just remember thinking, like, I know I'm not going to do this for the rest of my life. I didn't really have a plan, to be very honest with you at that point.
Nice.
Yeah, but I was getting older and my staff was getting younger and they seemed to need me more than my kids needed me even. So, I was then starting to hire former coworkers, their children. And
red flag.
I'm like, wow, I know I could be your mom. Like, there's not, like, I can't even play the cool aunt at this point. So, or the older sister, like, I know I could be your mom. So, but I never felt like I always say to people, like, I don't know what 50 quote unquote was supposed to feel like. I think like 50 is definitely very different, 30 years ago, from what it is today.
Is it different? Yeah. Why do you think it's different?
Maybe it's not. I mean, but it just feels like I feel like people are more youthful nowadays. I just feel like people have a more youth-minded approach to life, and maybe not taking, I don't know, it just, I think maybe, of course, that's perception. It was like, growing up with, your older family members and thinking, wow, they're so old.
So when Archie Bunker started on All in the Family, talk about senior moments. My God, All in the Family, he was 48 years old.
But that's just the thing. Like, if you think about like when the Golden Girls aired, those were women in their 50s.
Yeah.
50s and, early 50s, late 50s.
Rue McClanahan was 52. She was 3 years younger than me. Yeah. Living in a place with purple walls. Hello.
Exactly. I mean, and hey, I am all for living my best Golden Girl life. I mean, I would be all for that. I have no bones about it. And my daughter knows it. My friends know it. But it's, you like look at them and go, well, I definitely don't look like them. Like, I'm not. The funny thing is, like, I think people like talking about the Golden Girls felt like, oh, they were, but they were working. I mean, they were still working. They were still like having to earn, it wasn't like they were retiring. It wasn't like they, it's a show, whatever.
Look, whenever I want to feel good about myself, I look at 55-year-olds from 30 years ago. And I feel fantastic.
Yeah. So I don't know. I just was like, I struggled. I mean, I really did. When I turned 50 this past July, I definitely kind of struggled with it because I'm like, I don't really feel like I'm 50. Like, I feel like my kids are much older and much more mature than I am at times. So
they for sure are. Because I actually think it's about information. I think that we just all have so much more information now. Like, we know what the world looks like. We know a lot more things. Like 30, 40 years ago, like my entire world was 8 square blocks. If it didn't happen between National Boulevard and Cattaraugus, it didn't exist in the universe, And now we're seeing everybody all over. So we know what youthful looks like. We know what people are doing in different countries. We know things we can do, whereas in the past, we just didn't really have that, And
we are more educated on like how to take better care of ourselves. And,
right.
And like what is good or bad for our bodies, things of that nature. So, but yeah, like I went through this whole career transition back in 2017. I left a company I'd been with for 8 years, went on my own career journey. It was a roller coaster of a ride by all means. Ended up becoming a career coach, and which is what I've been doing since for the last 6 years, and now having kind of my own business. Never in a million years would you have ever heard me say like, "Oh, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to own my own business." Like that, those words were never in my vocabulary. Never had a plan for it.
Yeah.
It's not so much that I'm late to the game. It's just I'm in my own game and I'm running my own race.
I said the same thing too before I got in my OnlyFans account. So I understand. That's not true. I do not have an OnlyFans account. Billy's over there. He's already like logging in, like, what's the account? Why'd you leave? You'd been there for 8 years. That was your career.
Yeah.
What was the impetus for you to say, that's it, I'm out of here?
It should have happened a lot longer. It was definitely a toxic company. I had my head in the sand for quite some time, but the issues that were within the company had not affected the office that I was running. And like we knew it was coming. I mean, when he got promoted, he's a very good friend of mine, so I could get away with it. But I was literally like, "So, do we put bets on when you're fired?"
Well, after
I had
13, that's a pretty good bet, I guess, right?
Yeah, like that's just like he
Well,
knows it. That's why he didn't want the promotion.
I feel
That's
bad
why
for Eric already.
he fought getting promoted because he knew what would happen.
Right. Well, they're just putting him in the waiting room. That's okay.
That time finally came, and the person that they ended up promoting, no offense to her, but she was just a puppet in the string of command. Believe me, I don't want that position. You would have to have paid me a ton of money to set me aside for when I got fired.
Well, even with even with a ton of money, you're going to get fired in 6 months anyway. I mean, who cares?
Right. I was like, no.
Were you decided that, hey, I'm not going back to a company, I'm going to go embark on some new journey, or were you still a little hesitant?
No, I took a little bit of time off, made a major mistake of going to work for a friend of mine that ended up being probably one of the worst decisions I've ever made. I found myself kind of following his dream, not knowing I didn't even have any like real goals at that point. I was really lost in my career. I took a little bit of that time. Eventually decided, okay, I'm going to go corporate HR. Corporate recruiting was where I was going to focus on. Had an opportunity to take a class or course through for coaching. Financially, truthfully, I needed the extra money because all of these bad decisions that I had done after leaving
Yeah, I'm right there with
really
you.
hurt us financially. So someone was like, "Hey, could you do my resume for me?" And of course, this is what I've done, my entire career. And I said yes. I always say they probably just felt sorry for me. That led to something else, and next thing you know, I kind of have this little side business. It was all started honestly financially. It was
Well,
just
wait,
like to earn extra income.
what were the something else's and something else's? Because going from a corporate job, where you pay FICA, to like, hanging up your own shingle is a big decision, right? And how did you get
Yeah.
there? Especially when you're doing it a little bit later in life. How old were you at the time?
So in 2017, so I was 6 years ago, so I would have been 44. Yeah.
An infant. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
changing
44,
directions at
45.
44. That's a big deal. So what was the side business? What was the thing you thought I can do? And why'd you think you could do it?
Yeah, I was just literally working on resumes. It was literally just helping people with their resumes. That was how I first got started. And then I went down a rabbit hole of I remember another client of mine at the time. He was like, "Hey, could you help me draft my answers for my graduate?" He was applying for graduate school, and could you help me edit them? I'm a fairly good writer and editor. And so I was like, yeah, I can do that. Like I just started saying yes to a
Right.
lot of stuff.
Right.
Some of it didn't always work out well. A lot of it did. So then I was like, okay, I can do this. People say, "Oh, you have on a shoestring budget." I didn't even own a shoestring at that point financially. And yeah, and I mean, at one point, my teen, my she's now she's 21, but at the time she would help. My daughter would help me, with emails. She was probably my best employee I've ever had. She just
or
a
ever will have.
stellar.
You'll never
Yeah,
have
I'd
another one
ever.
like her. Yeah.
I never will
And
actually. I
she'll
know
remind
that.
you of it too. She'll remind you of all the great things she did
She's
for you and how she built you.
Oh yeah. I mean, I wish she would. I'm like, you want to come back to work for me? But no, she's got bigger and better things going on in her life. But yeah, so it just, I mean, it was building upon like baby steps.
Right.
And maybe a lot of it was, and of course I would read things such as like, oh, to start a business, you have to have so much in your bank account. And of course, none of that was happening. I mean, that wasn't what my situation was. I mean, I totally started a business on everything that they say. I did everything opposite of what they say you should have. And then I started taking a lot more trainings to educate myself on, back then I really wasn't doing LinkedIn. Now I work with professionals, entrepreneurs, from everything from their profiles to LinkedIn strategy. I talk about that quite a lot now. And then I started really just honing in on what are the things that I love to do when I was recruiting, which was preparing people for interviews, getting them prepared for that, and then leaning into the coaching aspect of it and really just helping people progress. Somebody would ask me, well, could you do this? Could you answer this question or could you answer this? And my
Always
answer
say
was,
yes. Always say
yeah, I
yes.
was always like, yeah.
In a previous life, I was an attorney, and I decided I wanted to get into real estate. I want to be a real estate attorney. So I just started telling everybody I was a real estate attorney. I had no idea what I
Yeah.
was doing. I mean, about a year and a half after that, I started figuring out what real estate actually was. But, they didn't know any better. And shoot, as long as they'd send me a check every month, I was good with it, right?
Well, that's just like I fell into this coaching thing and I just kind of assumed. I did do my research, but I really assumed like a lot of career coaches came from very similar backgrounds to mine. And to no discredit, I mean, we can come from all different backgrounds, but what I soon realized was that I had something special because I had 20 years of recruiting, and that's actually something that not a lot of career coaches have.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. I was
And
going to ask you, like, what specific skill sets had you developed over those years that made you pursue the coaching?
yeah, honestly, what I found was there was a big need of understanding like what actually happens in the hiring process because I wasn't just working with the candidates throughout my recruiting career. I was actually working with the hiring managers, the decision makers. I was the one presenting candidates to them, discussing their background, getting them to get their interviews. My whole career was truly based on my success was based on my candidates being hired. So that's how my success for those 20 years was determined. So I really just took a step back and then evaluated what that could translate for a candidate or for now a client on the coaching side, but also being able to educate them. And there's so much information out there that you can get, diluted very quickly. I mean, you can just get overwhelmed in terms of like, what do I do? Why is this important? And so that was I can't, to sound too cliche, that is definitely kind of a superpower of being able to understand what does happen on the flip side and
Super,
how do you market yourself to that.
yeah, superpowers are never cliche. As a superpowers are superpowers. So what were the things that happened that allowed you to transition from a side gig to a career?
One of the biggest things I will say is family support. That was a big, huge factor. I did do corporate recruiting in DC for it was almost a year. I did do that while my business was, and I was still working on my business, really juggling it, both of them almost full time. Anytime I had a break, I was working on one or the other. That job, I knew that job didn't have longevity just based on what I was seeing happening and working with the upper C suite. So from there, what I did was I just really started honing in. I knew I was going to get laid off. I knew that was coming. I wasn't scared at that point.
You weren't even a vice president, and you knew you were going to get
Yeah,
fired.
yeah,
So
I knew I was
that's
getting.
something special.
It was actually it was the second time I'd ever been laid off in my entire career. So, but when that moment happened, just had a conversation. I have a really good relationship. I'm very fortunate with my ex-husband and had a conversation with him. And, we kind of looked over my numbers and we just basically said, hey, if I've been doing this kind of on a part-time basis, what would happen if I could do it on a full-time basis? And so gave myself 6 months to a year to see if I could really make that successful and really build it. And we're here now 6 years later.
That's awesome.
So
Well, look, I think family support is huge. I mean, I'm 55 years old. I was crying to my dad today about something, and it's not just for financial support or even for work. It's there's like a moral support you need when you're on your own and you make that decision. I'm going to do this. I mean, you need somebody to be there to make you feel good when you're down. To kind of give you a slap in the ass when you're dragging a little bit. I mean, that's a huge indicator of your chances to succeed.
I absolutely agree. And I always tell people too, like when you're dealing with your career, a lot of times too, your family, sometimes it's not that they don't support you, it's just that they're scared for you. Or they may be scared for themselves too. If you come home and be like, hey, honey, I'm gonna change my career. And I'm gonna pivot. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, how are we gonna pay our bills? What
Yeah.
about the insurance? Like what's gonna happen? And so I mean, I always tell my clients a lot of times, like, I'm never going to coach you to do it the way I did it. Because
Well,
I,
how scared were you? Like on a scale of, you know, I'm going to go out and kill it and, make 100 calls a day to, being in a fetal position in the bathroom. Like, where were you on the
you
continuum?
know, I think in the very beginning, I was less scared. I did have kind of a major scare this past summer with my business for the first time in a long time. That I definitely would say was definitely like a 10, a 9 or a 10 this past summer. But when I first started, maybe it's just like not having the knowledge of like what you're supposed to be scared about. I felt like I came from having hit rock bottom. So for me at that point, personally, and from a professional standpoint, there was really no other place to go but up.
Well, look,
Like
not even
there's
knowing the questions to ask is a very empowering place. Hell, let's go. Let's
right.
rock and
Like I
roll.
mean, I didn't know. I think I was just so like I have to succeed. And so sometimes good or bad because it has hindered me in the past. Sometimes I can put my head down and I'm so stubborn that I'm just like, no, I will make this succeed. I will do this. This will happen. And in this case, it definitely benefited me just because I've never really had that thought. Literally, I mean, I've gone, there's been tough times, of course. You hit a speed bump in the road and it's like, oh man, this is the worst thing ever. But, I've always been able to kind of pick myself back up. This past summer when I hit kind of a big speed bump, I was
Ooh,
probably more
what you can't
scared.
you can't do that. What was the speed bump? Let's hear about the speed bump. That's always
So
the interesting part.
I have a nonprofit with my best friend, and we go to Honduras every single year. I've done it since 2015. Our trip was this past July. It was left on the day that I turned 50 years old. So went to Honduras for 10 days. Amazing trip. We did our work there, all
What's your
that.
work? You're skipping over all the cool details,
I
Melanie.
know.
Come on,
I'm
what's the work?
no, so we went on a mission trip back in 2015, and we've gotten connected with the church there. And ultimately, a couple of years ago, we finally decided to start our own nonprofit. And then we go and work at the educational center. It's in a very small village. It's called the village. It's a Limon. It's the name of the village in southern Honduras. We sponsor kids through the church organization, but we help support the educational center that helps create a safe space for the kids in a very very dangerous area. Of course, gangs, a lot of course, sex trafficking, drugs. Education is not valued there from the state level. So you've got a lot of I mean, when I say destitute and poor, it's beyond the poor that we
Yeah,
recognize here.
Americans just don't understand poor until you've gone out of the
Yeah,
country, like Central America and some other places. You don't know what poor is.
when you see a family of five living in probably less space than your studio there,
Well,
um, you know,
that's a big bar to get over here. Let me tell you, pretty spacious
and
and luxurious.
living on a dirt floor and three people to a bed that may be bug infested. I mean, reality sets in really quickly,
Yeah.
and I will say that even during my lowest of lows and going through my own professional journey, that always has brought me back to like no matter what, I still had a roof over my head. I had hot water, like I still always had that.
Well, those
And
things
no
really,
matter.
yeah, those things nourish your soul, and we spend a lot of
Yeah.
time in America because we're such capitalist pigs. And I say that with lovingly, I mean, we spend so much time on our professional lives and making money and succeeding and buying whatever it is we're buying this season. You forget about how important it is to help people or be a service to other people. I'm fortunate enough to work in the senior housing industry, and I get to go and hang out with, 100 seniors every day who come up to me and hug me and say, "Thank you, Dan. We're living our best lives because of you. Thank you so much." Money aside, nothing is better in the world than to get that kind of feedback from people who you really are helping.
It's definitely, my daughter is involved with it. She went when she was 14, 15, somewhere in that age range. I mean, it was life transforming for her. And it's always a reminder, like you said. I mean, you have kids come up to you that, we give out at the end of our trip, we always give out a bunch of sunglasses. We have a bunch of people that donate sunglasses. And, you would think we've given these kids like $1 million. And truthfully, I've always like, I want to do more. I want to do more. And so, yeah, so we started the nonprofit, and we're lucky that we have the partners with the church that really believe in us and know that we're 100% on board. So, yeah, every summer we go there, and I
That's
go there
great
for
stuff.
about 7 to 10 days. Wish I could go more. I mean, that would be, definitely big goal to be able to go more. When I came back, I'm all pumped. I'm just, my gratitude meter is full filled. I'm, ready to make it happen again. And then, yeah, it was like all of a sudden I had no new clients coming. And
Hello.
and at first,
Welcome back to
yeah,
America.
right. And at first I was like, oh, this is just a little blip on the screen. We'll get back into it. I think we were back like July 17th, somewhere in there, through pretty much all of August and even part of September. I kept telling myself, like, okay, it's going to get better. It's going to get better.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I have friends, who have small businesses, and when you're on your own, and you make money from your living room, you just don't have the marketing budgets. You don't have the advertising
Yeah.
dollars. You don't have the people. And when those clients stop coming in and you have no idea why they were there before and why they're not here now, it's a terrifying situation.
I literally was like, did my business close and nobody told me? Like, I
Right.
was literally like, I was like, is there a bad review about me? I was literally like baffled. And that's probably the first time in a long time that I was truthfully scared. I was very much having conversations about, could I go back into recruiting? What would that look like? What kind of recruiting option? I mean, I was sincerely looking at recruiting options, ready to, like, in a lot of ways, throw in the towel, because I did not see an end in sight. I really didn't. I didn't see, like, I wasn't like, I mean, I kept telling myself it's going to get better, and it wasn't at anything. Now, I say that fast forward to today, where I'm like this week, like running around like a chicken with my head cut off. I've got clients coming in. That one client signed up last night. I don't really recall like ever talking to her. I mean, I was
Right.
like, your name looks familiar, but, and then another
As
client.
long as the check clears, it's fine. Who cares?
Yeah, so it's like, for a person that doesn't like riding roller coasters, I've chosen like the biggest roller coaster to ride.
So how did you get
So,
out of it? I mean, was there something you did, or did it just magically reappear?
I went back to some of the basics that I knew always worked for me in the beginning, and just worked my butt off, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that works.
I
Sometimes that
followed
works.
up. I just went back to my sales background, followed up on every single lead. I wasn't going to, be picky about the level of the client, or what the level of the work was. I was like, here's a discount. Like, I was literally like, whatever it's going to take to get you to sign up to work with me, I'm pretty much willing to do it right
Yeah,
now. So,
I'm always amazed at how lucky I get when I work harder. Somehow luck
yeah.
seems to find you when you're hammering away, in those wee morning hours. So let's talk about your business. What specifically do you do? What are your services and what are your clients coming to you for?
Yeah. So, as a career coach, my biggest areas of focus are job search strategy, resume writing, LinkedIn strategy, as well as networking, and, well, job search strategy with networking, as well as interview preparation. Those are kind of my areas. Those are my strengths. And I work with usually mid career professionals and above into the C suite. I work with professionals that come from all different types of industries and backgrounds all throughout the United States. And I've worked a little bit in with some European clients. And so I work with them on everything from whether it's just helping guide them and, overcoming, understanding kind of what the landscape is saying in terms of their career, creating action items for them to focus on, or developing the language to reach out and broaden their network and broaden their thought, as an expert in their field, to helping them with their resumes, applying for positions. I really it's really 360 in terms of from start to finish of everything I offer to a particular client.
So we have kind of a middle-aged audience, ergo the name, middle-aged mess.
Yeah.
Ageism, how bad is it? How do we get around it? How often you see it?
Ageism is real. Ageism sucks. Again, I can tell you from having been on the flip side of the coin, I've had conversations that I should never have had with hiring managers, that they would very blatantly be discriminating based on, well, a variety of things, but ageism is real. My direct deal towards ageism is that unfortunately, a lot of the onus gets put on the candidate to overcome it. The reality is you're not going to overcome a bias. That's just the reality of it. So how do you overcome it? Accept it and acknowledge it, but you've got to continue to push yourself to, get that in front of that right opportunity with the right company that is going to value your experience. There's obviously lots of tips and things of like, don't mention how many years of experience you have, or don't do this or that. And I'm like, at the end of the day, I can tell you as a recruiter, they're going to figure it out. Okay.
Yeah.
Like it's not it's not like,
if you walk in and you're bald and you got crow's feet, I hate to tell you, but you're 60. It's cool.
While I do employ those, there are tips of things that I do employ when I am writing a resume. My biggest thing now is like, no, you know what? I want you to embrace it.
Isn't there something very empowering about a person who goes in and owns all that stuff? Says, look, I'm 55, I'm 65, I'm 75. Like, fuck you. I have more experience. I know what I'm doing, and let's get to work. Right.
Exactly. And so I've had kind of, and maybe it's because as I've gotten older, maybe that's where that's coming from. I mean, I've always been really open about, the fact that it does exist. I'm not going to sit here and go, oh yeah, it's not that bad of a deal. But the reality is you're not going to overcome any particular bias that somebody has across that table. And at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, if they really don't want to hire you because you're 50 or 55, whatever, do you want to work for that person?
Right.
Probably not to begin with. So it's not the right opportunity if that's going to be your boss. We do a disservice to that question when we don't tell candidates that they should own it.
Yeah, you should be your truth. You should live your truth, right? Because you're coaching. You're not just doing like recruiting consulting. How often do you coach some of your clients to go start their own businesses? Go do your own thing.
Yeah, in the last few years, I've actually coached quite a few. I actually have one gentleman right now that he has his own coaching business, in fact, and he's kind of dabbling in being a consultant. I've had one client that was in corporate, and we went through a lot of the work. And after talking with several of like her identified key leaders of her network, she ultimately started her own business in video production. And, so if I think it makes sense and that is a direction that is of an interest, I definitely will help encourage my clients in going in that direction if I feel like that's something that they are really equipped to being able to kind of pursue, or if it's really something that they are interested in. But I actually do work with a fair amount of like the people that kind of cross that line of entrepreneur, but still working like in the corporate setting. And I have one regular client. She's, her own consultant, PR consultant in the oncology field.
I think it's so intriguing about, the concept of coaching these days, and look, there's a lot of coaches out there, but what it's done is it's kind of expanded on the traditional idea of consulting. There are people who knew a specific thing and they could teach you a specific thing. But I think we've broadened into a society where we want to learn more. It's not just about teaching me a specific skill. Don't just teach me the fish. Teach me how to decide whether fishing is the thing that I want to do. It's way more than just here's my course. Take my 10 lesson course It's much more about let's learn about you and let's learn about what makes you tick and what you're good at. And let's find a life that fits you better than whatever you've had in the past.
I fully agree with that. I fully think that you have to, I've lost both my parents, so it's definitely something I think makes you reflective, of course, when that happens. But I also talk to so many people that are just truly unhappy in their jobs, and I'm like, what is it going to take for you to be happy? Because it's not where you're at. I can tell you that.
Look, if somebody's talking to you, they're clearly not happy. They're
Right.
looking for something, right?
Exactly. Well, yeah. And I'm like, at some point, you've either got to accept your situation and circumstances, or what are you going to do about it? And what does that look like for you?
How happy are you right now? Scale of 1 to 10.
You know what? I would say I'm a very solid 8, just because this week's been kind of crazy.
Ever have any ideas of going back into the old corporate rat race, or you're good?
I'm very good right now. Every so often I may have that itch to like really get back into recruiting. And then I'm reminded of how insane and hard it is. And you know what? I worked really hard for 20 years.
Gotcha.
I'm still working hard, but I'm doing it definitely for myself now. I can say that being 50 is, isn't that bad.
Okay, let's do that. So Melanie, you're on the other side, right?
I
of
know.
that, whatever that 50-year concept
Whatever
we think about,
Yeah.
Is it better? Is it worse? Is it all you thought and dreamed it was going to be, or are you freaking out?
I was definitely freaking out before. I will say it has gotten, since July, it's gotten much better. And I find that I am actually been much happier and just kind of coming into my own. And so I know there's a lot of, in particular, women that will speak to that when they hit that mark and feel like they're finally just kind of getting in their own, skin and their comfort, like they're very, happy. And I'm starting to, even though I'm still a baby in that span of time, and it's only really been 6 months, I'm starting to kind of feel that. So, well, let's talk when I'm 55 and I'm feeling like 60 is knocking. So,
well, I am 55 and I can assure you 60 is knocking, but look, I got to tell you, I love the 50s. I think they're great. I mean, I have a ton of life experiences like you. My kids are gone, which is spectacular. And you really get a chance to kind of look back and say, what did I like about this journey and what do I want to keep doing? And I think that's the best part of it. I think that's what this podcast is all about. It's about journeys of people who have done certain things for a long time and decide, I maybe want to do something different or something more empowering or something more inspirational or something that just makes me feel better on a daily basis. I love hearing stories like yours of people who were in a situation that was okay. I'm sure you did okay in the corporate world and you made a couple bucks and it was fine and you had some nice, stilettos, but it wasn't for you as you moved on and you found something that's better and richer and somewhere where you can help and serve other people, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely say the things that when I wake up now, it is all about like, what do I want out of today? What do I want for success? What are my goals? It's not being driven by the person above me telling me what needs to happen. I get to determine that pathway. So, and for that, I am very thankful for.
That's awesome. And that's the message I hope everybody hears on a daily basis. Well, Melanie, thanks so much. Melanie Mitchell Wexler, not Melanie Wexler Mitchell. Thank you so much for coming on today. I appreciate hearing your story. And thanks to all you for listening. And this has been another episode of Middle Age Mess. We'll see you next time. Thanks.